The night was cold, and the streets were empty. Snow covered the sidewalks, and the wind cut through the city. Ethan drove his black car slowly, the sound of the tires crushing the thin ice beneath them. He had been working late again, leaving his office when everyone else had already gone home. He was a man who owned much but carried a loneliness no one could see. The tall buildings around him glowed with lights, but his world felt dark inside. As he stopped at a red light, his eyes caught something unusual. At the corner of the bus stop, he saw a young woman sitting on the bench. She wore an old coat that did not seem strong enough for the night. In her arms was a small baby, wrapped in a thin blanket. She held the baby close to her chest, her hands trembling from the cold. The sight made Ethan tighten his grip on the steering wheel. The woman was shivering, and the baby gave a weak cry that cut through the noise of the city. The light turned green, but Ethan did not press the gas. He sat there for a moment, his mind wrestling. Many drivers would pass by, pretending not to see, but he could not move forward, pulled the car over near the bus stop and stepped out. The icy wind hit his face, but his focus stayed on the woman and child. She looked up, her eyes filled with both fear and exhaustion. She was ready to turn away from him, to protect her baby from a stranger, but she was too weak to even stand. Ethan walked slowly toward her, keeping his hands open so she would not feel alarmed. "You should not be out here with the baby," Ethan said in a calm voice. She shook her head. "The bus will come soon. We will be fine." Her voice was thin and tired. Ethan looked at the blanket around the baby and knew it was not true. He saw the red on her hands from the cold, the way her body shook even while she tried to look strong. The bus stop was empty and quiet. No buses were coming this late. He knew it, and deep down she knew it too. "Let me help," he said. "Come with me. The baby cannot stay in this cold." She hesitated. Her name was Claire. She had spent her day at the hospital working through a long shift and then waiting for the late bus to take her home. She had no car, no one to call, and she was used to carrying her burdens alone. Trusting a stranger was not something she wanted, but the cold bit into her bones, and her baby needed warmth more than her pride needed distance. Ethan removed his coat and placed it gently around her shoulders. She tried to resist, but her hands were too cold to push him away. The coat was heavy and warm, and the baby gave a softer cry as if sensing the change. "Please," Ethan said, his tone steady. "I will take you somewhere safe. I will not leave you like this." Claire looked into his eyes. There was no arrogance in them, no sign of harm, only a quiet firmness that made her heart pause. Slowly she stood, holding her baby tight. Ethan reached out his hand, but she chose to stand on her own. Even so, she gave a small nod. Ethan guided her to his car, opening the door for her. She stepped inside, unsure of what she was stepping into, but knowing she had little choice. He sat behind the wheel again, glancing once at her reflection in the glass. The baby stirred, settling into her arms, no longer crying. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt a warmth rise inside him, not from his coat or his car, but from the thought that tonight he had done something more than chase numbers and empty success. The engine roared back to life, and the car moved through the frozen streets. Inside the car, the nurse and her baby sat in silence, while the lonely man at the wheel wondered why this meeting felt like the beginning of something he had been waiting for his whole life. The car moved through the quiet city, while the snow kept falling. Claire held her baby close, the blanket pulled high to protect him from the air that still lingered cold on her skin. She looked out the window, watching the empty streets pass, her mind restless. She did not know this man beside her. Yet she was sitting in his car because he had shown kindness when no one else had stopped. Ethan kept his eyes on the road. He wanted to speak, but he also knew she was cautious. Her silence told him she was still unsure of him. He respected that, but he also wanted her to feel safe. "You both need something warm to eat," Ethan said after a few minutes. His voice was steady, not forceful. "There is a diner still open, not far from here. Let me take you there." Claire looked at her baby, then back at him. Hunger gnawed at her, but she was not used to taking help. Still, her baby's needs mattered more than her pride. She gave a small nod. Soon the car pulled into a small diner with bright lights glowing against the dark night. Ethan stepped out first, then opened the door for her. Claire stepped carefully with the baby in her arms. The sudden rush of warm air inside the diner felt almost unreal. She let out a breath she did not realize she was holding. They sat at a booth near the window. Claire kept her baby close, rocking him gently while Ethan ordered food. He ordered soup, bread, and warm milk for the baby, without even asking what she wanted, as if he knew simple food would be best. When the plates came, Claire hesitated. Ethan noticed and spoke softly. "Please eat. You need strength." She picked up the spoon and tasted the soup. Warmth spread through her body. It had been hours since she had eaten. She tried to hide her need, but Ethan noticed every detail. He watched her with quiet respect, not pity. "Do you always wait at bus stops this late?" he asked, his tone more curious than demanding. "I had no choice," she said, keeping her eyes on her baby. "I finished work at the hospital and missed the earlier bus. I thought another one would come, but it did not." "You are a nurse," Ethan said, leaning back slightly. She nodded. "Yes, I work long shifts. It is hard, but it pays for what I need." Ethan looked at her tired eyes, the way she held her baby with such care. He thought of his own life, filled with meetings, contracts, and empty dinners. She lived with so little, yet gave so much of herself. The contrast struck him deeply. "Do you have anyone to help you?" Ethan asked carefully. Claire shook her head. "No, it is just me and him." She kissed her baby's head. "That is enough." The words were strong, but Ethan could hear the weight behind them. He knew she had faced struggles that would have broken many, yet she stood firm. They ate in silence for a while, the clink of cutlery filling the space. The baby finally relaxed, drinking the warm milk and drifting into sleep. Claire's shoulders eased as she looked at her child's calm face. "You should not have been left alone at that stop," Ethan said. "It was dangerous." "I manage," she replied quickly. "I always manage." Ethan wanted to say more but stopped himself. He knew she did not want sympathy. Instead, he let the silence speak, a silence that somehow felt less lonely than before. When they finished, Ethan paid the bill. Claire tried to protest, but he raised a hand gently. "It is nothing." "Let me at least do this," she sighed, giving in. She could not remember the last time someone had taken care of even a small thing for her. As they stepped back outside, the cold air returned, but it felt less cruel than before. Ethan walked beside her, not too close, not too far, as if letting her decide the distance. The car waited, and for the first time that night, Claire felt a small sense of relief. She did not know where this road was leading, but she knew her baby was warm. And for one night, she was not facing the world alone. The car rolled forward again through the quiet streets. Claire sat with her baby pressed against her chest. She looked down at the child, brushing a small hand that rested on the blanket. The diner's warmth still lingered, but she knew soon she would be back in her world, the small place she called home. Ethan kept glancing at her from the corner of his eye. Something about her stayed on his mind. She was calm, yet strong, worn down by long days, but still holding her baby with steady care. He wanted to ask more, to learn who she really was, but he kept his voice low so as not to disturb her peace. "Where do you live?" Ethan asked, after a pause. Claire gave him the name of her street. He nodded and turned the wheel toward that part of town. As the car moved farther from the bright buildings, the streets grew older, the lights dimmer, and the roads rougher. Ethan noticed how different it was from the world he knew. They reached a narrow block where small apartments stood close together. The walls were worn and the windows dull. He parked the car near a cracked sidewalk. Claire opened the door and stepped out, holding her baby close again. She turned toward Ethan with a tired but polite smile. "Thank you for the ride and for the food. You did not have to do any of it." "I wanted to," Ethan said. He stepped out too, his shoes crunching on the thin ice. Claire walked up the short steps of her building. The light above the door flickered weakly. She fumbled for her keys while balancing the baby in her arms. Ethan watched in silence. A part of him wanted to follow her inside, to make sure she and the baby were safe, but he stayed back, knowing it was her space. She opened the door and turned to him once more. Good night," Ethan replied. But as she disappeared inside, a hollow feeling spread through him. The door closed, and he stood for a moment staring at it before walking back to his car. Inside her apartment, Claire laid her baby in a small crib pushed against the wall. The heater rattled but barely gave warmth. She sat on the edge of her bed, closing her eyes for a moment. Her body ached from the long day, yet her mind kept returning to the man who had helped her. She had seen wealth before, people passing by without care, but Ethan had stopped. That single act unsettled her thoughts. Back in his apartment across town, Ethan poured himself a glass of water, but left it untouched on the counter. His home was wide, filled with polished wood and tall glass, yet it felt empty. He sat by the window, staring at the city lights below. The face of Claire holding her baby stayed in his memory. He tried to focus on tomorrow's meetings, but none of it seemed to matter. The night stretched long. Claire rocked her baby back to sleep when he stirred, humming quietly to keep him calm. She thought of her shift tomorrow, the bills waiting on the table, and the endless routine she lived. Yet a small part of her heart wondered if she had just met someone who might change everything. Ethan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Wealth, power, and the respect of many, but none of those things had ever given him peace. Meeting Claire for a single night had done more than years of empty success. He realized with quiet shock that for the first time in years, he did not feel completely alone. The city outside went on as always, but in two small corners of it, lives that had seemed far apart now felt tied by something unseen. Neither of them fully understood it yet, but both knew they would not forget the night at the bus stop. The storm came 2 nights later. The wind pushed hard against the city, snow falling heavy and quick. Claire finished her late shift at the hospital, already worried about how she would carry her baby through the cold. The buses had been delayed, and the walk to her apartment would be long and harsh. As she stepped outside the hospital doors, her phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen. It was from a driver she did not know, but the words were clear. Ethan had sent the car for her. She froze, her hand gripping the phone tight. She had not spoken to him since that night, yet somehow he had known. For a moment her pride told her to refuse. She did not want to depend on anyone. But then she looked at her baby, resting in her arms, and knew the storm would not forgive her stubbornness. The black car pulled up, headlights cutting through the falling snow. The driver stepped out and opened the door. Claire climbed in, her baby safe against her chest. The warmth inside the car felt like a shield against the storm outside. When the car stopped, Ethan was waiting. He stood near the entrance of a tall building, his coat buttoned, but his hair wet from the snow. Claire stepped out, her breath rising in the cold air. She wanted to ask why, but the words caught in her throat. "You should not be out in this storm," Ethan said, his voice calm. "Come inside, just for tonight." Claire hesitated. She had lived by her own strength for so long. The baby stirred against her, letting out a small cry, and she knew the answer. She followed Ethan inside. The lobby was bright and warm. The guard at the desk nodded at Ethan with respect. Claire kept her head down, not used to such places. Ethan guided her to the elevator, his steps quiet. Inside, the air was still, the hum of the lift filling the silence. When the doors opened, Claire stepped into an apartment unlike anything she'd ever seen. The space was wide, with tall glass windows showing the storm outside. Lights glowed soft along the walls, and the furniture stood clean and strong. She held her baby tighter, afraid to touch anything. "You can rest here," Ethan said. "There is a room ready, fresh blankets, and a crib. Use them." Her eyes widened. "You set up a crib?" "I did not want your child to feel out of place," Ethan replied. Claire walked slowly into the room he pointed to. It was simple but warm, the crib placed near the bed, blankets folded neatly. She laid her baby down, brushing his hair gently. For the first time in a long while, she felt him settle in peace. Ethan stood at the doorway watching. He did not step closer, only waited. Claire turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Because you should not face the world alone. No one should." His words pressed deep into her heart. She wanted to push back, to remind him that she was used to carrying her burdens. But the truth was clear. Tonight, she needed help, and he had given it without asking for anything in return. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. Ethan brought her a cup of tea, setting it on the table. She accepted it with quiet thanks. They sat together in the storm's shadow, no words needed. The wind howled against the glass, but inside the apartment there was only stillness. Claire looked at her baby asleep in the crib. Ethan's eyes stayed on the storm, but his thoughts were on her. The first time, she began to wonder if this man's world was not so far from hers after all. The morning sun broke through the storm, casting pale light across the wide windows of Ethan's apartment. Claire woke to the sound of her baby stirring in the crib. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The soft blankets, the clean room, and the quiet air felt too different from her small apartment. Then she remembered the night before, the storm and Ethan's offer. She lifted her baby into her arms, rocking him gently. The child laughed, bright and full of energy. She kissed his cheek, grateful he had slept peacefully. As she turned, she saw Ethan standing near the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked at her with a faint smile, though his eyes carried the same steady calm as before. "I thought you could use this," he said, handing her a cup. Claire accepted it carefully. "Thank you." "Now, you did too much already." "It was nothing," Ethan replied. "You needed a safe place. I'm glad you accepted." She sat on the bed, sipping the warm drink, but her thoughts pulled in many directions. She wanted to thank him more, yet part of her heart held back. She did not want to depend on him. She had lived too long carrying everything herself. "You should know," Claire said slowly, "I cannot promise to always accept this kind of help. People have let me down before. I learned not to lean on anyone." Ethan listened. His expression did not change. "I understand. I have also been let down, more times than I want to count." His words caught her by surprise. She had seen his wealth, his power, the respect he carried. It was hard to imagine someone like him hurt in the same way. Later that morning, Ethan drove her back to her building. As they pulled up, Claire felt the contrast press on her again. His car, clean and strong, against the cracked sidewalk and broken doors of her apartment. She wanted to disappear into her small world, yet he stepped out too, following her to the door. Inside, her apartment showed its truth. The paint on the walls peeled, the heater rattled weakly, the crib was small and worn. She tried to move quickly, to hide what little she had, but Ethan noticed everything. He did not speak, but she felt his eyes on the room. "Do not look at it like that," Claire said, sharper than she meant. "This is what we have. We manage." "I was not judging," Ethan said. "I was only thinking how much you carry." Her hands tightened around her baby. "I do what I must." At his life. The silence that followed was heavy. She wanted him to leave, yet at the same time she felt a strange comfort in his presence. That evening, after finishing her shift, Claire found Ethan waiting outside the hospital. She frowned, confused. "Why are you here again?" she asked. "You looked tired last night," Ethan said. "I thought I could drive you home." "Nothing more." She hesitated, then sighed. "You cannot keep doing this. I am not a project for you to fix." Ethan's gaze held firm. "You are not a project. You are someone who deserves more than cold bus stops and empty nights. That is all." Her chest tightened at his words. She wanted to argue, but the truth in his tone made it hard. That night, as they drove together again, the baby asleep in her arms, Claire felt something shift inside her. She had built walls around her heart to keep pain out, but Ethan's quiet presence was finding cracks in those walls. Ethan, too, felt the change. Watching her cradle her child with such care made him wonder if the life he had built for himself was missing the only thing that truly mattered. The road stretched ahead, and though neither spoke, both felt the same truth growing stronger. Something was pulling them closer, even as their fears tried to keep them apart. The weeks moved quickly, and the bond between Ethan and Claire grew in quiet steps. He began to visit her after work, sometimes bringing food, sometimes only staying to talk for a short while. Claire never asked him for anything, but he always found a way to help without making her feel small. Her baby grew comfortable in his arms, smiling each time Ethan lifted him. One evening, Ethan invited her to a company charity event. Claire refused at first, saying she had no clothes for such a place, no time, no reason to stand in a world that was not hers. But Ethan did not give up, said it was not about the event, it was about standing beside him. After long thought, Claire agreed. When the night came, Claire wore a simple dress she had kept folded in her closet for years. She carried her baby in a neat blanket and walked with Ethan into the hall filled with lights and music. People turned their heads as they entered. Men in suits and women in shining gowns stared, whispering to one another. Claire felt every glance cut into her. She wanted to turn back, to run home where no one could judge her. Ethan noticed her unease. Without pause, he reached for her hand. His grip was firm, but gentle, steadying her heart. "You belong here because you are with me," he said quietly. The words gave her strength. She lifted her head and walked beside him. He introduced her not as a guest or a stranger, but with pride, his voice clear as he said her name. For the first time in her life, Claire felt seen in a room where she thought she would be invisible. But not everyone was kind. A group of women near the corner whispered too loudly. "Who is she?" one asked. "She does not fit here." Another laughed softly. "He must be bored to bring someone like her." Claire heard it all. Her face burned and her hand trembled in Ethan's. She thought of pulling away, of leaving before the shame grew deeper. But Ethan stepped forward, his voice sharp and strong. "She is with me," he said to the group, his eyes firm. "That is all anyone here needs to know." The room grew quiet around them. The women fell silent, their pride fading under his gaze. Claire's heart pounded. She had never seen anyone defend her like that. As the night went on, Ethan stayed close to her. He introduced her to others, always with respect. He held her baby in his arms at one point, rocking him gently, while Claire spoke with another nurse who had come as a guest. The sight of Ethan holding her child struck her heart in a way she could not explain. For the first time, she imagined what life might be like if she allowed him into it fully. But fear still pressed against her. When they left the event, walking back to the car, Claire spoke in a low voice. "This is not my world. I cannot live like this. People will never accept me." Ethan stopped, facing her in the cold night air. "I do not care about people. I care about you. And I want you in my life. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I want you." His words hit deep. She turned away, her eyes wet, but her voice steady. "I am afraid. I cannot give you what your world expects." "I do not want what the world expects," Ethan said. "I want what feels real." They stood in silence, the city lights glowing around them. Claire's heart raced with fear and hope, torn between running back to safety and stepping toward something new. She held her baby tighter, unsure of what choice she could make. Ethan did not press her further. He opened the car door and waited. She stepped inside, still caught between walls and dreams. The road ahead was uncertain, but both knew the moment was leading toward a decision that could change their lives forever. The days after the event were heavy for Claire. She returned to her shifts at the hospital, her thoughts torn between her work, her baby, and the man who had stood beside her in front of everyone. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Ethan's face when he told her he wanted her, not out of pity, but out of truth. She wanted to believe him, yet fear wrapped around her heart. One late evening as she left the hospital, she saw him waiting again. His car stood near the curb, his figure leaning against it. Snowflakes fell softly, but he did not move until she walked closer. "You came again," Claire said, her voice quiet. "I will keep coming," Ethan replied. "Not to rescue you. To be here, if you will let me." Her baby stirred in her arms, and she looked down at him. The child's small hand reached out as if pointing toward Ethan. A rush of emotion filled her chest. She had tried so long to fight alone, but here was someone who had already given more than she thought possible. "I do not know how to live in your world," Claire said. "I am afraid I will never be enough." Ethan stepped closer. "Then do not try to live in my world. Let us build a new one together. One where your fears do not decide for you." The wind blew, carrying his words between them. Claire's heart pounded. She wanted to run, yet her feet stayed still. She wanted to say no, yet her lips refused. She lifted her eyes and met his. The steady strength there pulled at her walls until they cracked. "Come with me," Ethan said, his hand reaching out. "Not because you need saving, but because I need you. Both of you." Claire looked at her baby again. The child's eyes blinked open, resting calmly, as if waiting for her choice. She pressed her lips to his forehead, then raised her head.
"Yes."
Slowly, she placed her free hand into Ethan's. "Yes," she whispered. "I will come." Relief spread across Ethan's face, a warmth he had not felt in years. He pulled her close, careful of the baby between them, and held her with a strength that promised he would never let go. That night, they did not return to separate homes. Ethan brought them to his apartment, but this time it felt different. It was not charity, not duty, but the beginning of a life they would share. Claire laid her baby in the crib he had set for him, then turned to find Ethan still watching her, his eyes full of something she had once thought she would never find. Claire sat beside Ethan on the couch, the silence between them no longer heavy but alive. She felt the walls inside her breaking for good, replaced with something new. "You will not be lonely again," Claire said softly. "And neither will you," Ethan answered. The storm outside faded, leaving the city calm and clear. Inside the apartment, 3 lives joined into one. The man who had been empty found a family, and the woman who had carried her burden alone found a partner who would carry it with her. Ethan held her hand. Claire leaned into him, and their baby slept peacefully. The road ahead would not be easy, but they had chosen it together. The simple words that began at a bus stop now echoed as a promise. "Come with me."